State Representative, House District 22.
I'm sorry, listen, let me start that one again. Hello, Wes Cantrell is running for State Representative, House District 22. My name is Harry Abrams, and welcome to the CCRP candidate interviews.
Thanks, Harry.
And thank you for taking the time out of your campaign to participate in this interview process. We've extended this invitation to all candidates in this race, and have found that it has been an asset that aids voters in making their decision. The video will appear on the Cherokee County GOP website, and every effort will be taken to maintain it exclusively on that site. The interview will be shown in its entirety. For the interview, we will be asking approximately 30 questions that can offer no prompting. There are no right or wrong answers, merely your answers.
Okay.
We ask each candidate the same questions. If this is all right with you, I'll have my cohort introduce themselves, and then we'll begin.
Okay, fine.
Good afternoon, Wes. Bill Burrell, nice to have you here.
Bill, it's nice to be here.
Bill, you want to start?
Absolutely. Wes, are you currently a member of the Cherokee County Republican Party?
I am.
Excellent. Could you also describe 3 pieces of legislation that you'd like to see passed, whether creating law or removing current law?
Okay. Am I limited to 3?
No, many as you want.
Okay. I think one of the first things that I would do is either to introduce or support legislation that's been introduced by some of the other in our Cherokee delegation, Michael Caldwell. I think it was co-sponsored by Scott Turner as well. A bill that would enact term limits for all state legislators. I'm personally limiting myself to 4 terms. The House of Representatives was designed to be a citizen-led body, and unfortunately, it's become dominated by career politicians. So I know a lot of candidates have talked like I'm talking right now prior to being elected, and then they kind of got sucked into the system. So I'm making it very clear that that will be one of the first items on my agenda personally, is either to support, I think it was H.R. 5 that Michael Caldwell proposed, or introduce new legislation to require term limits for all state legislator positions. And my position would be 4 terms.
Okay.
4 terms. I think if you can't get it done in 8 years, then you're probably not going to ever get it done, and it's time to give someone else a chance. It's supposed to be a citizen-led body. Second legislation I would be in favor of and maybe enact would be to abolish the state income tax and implement something along the lines of the fair tax. I'm open to discussion about what that would look like. I'd like to see Georgia lead the way. I think our state income tax has hindered us in a lot of ways. Our neighbors to the south, Florida, neighbors to the north, Tennessee, neighbor to the west, Texas, they don't have a state income tax, and businesses are flocking to those states. So I'd like to see us abolish the state income tax. I'd be in favor of any legislation that increases educational opportunity for parents and their children. So anything that would increase options, because not every child learns best in the traditional classroom setting, and we need to recognize that, and we need to provide the options that parents need if they have a student who's not performing well in the traditional classroom. And then I would be in favor of any legislation that makes Georgia more pro-life than it already is. I believe in speaking up for those who cannot speak for themselves, and an obvious group that would apply to would be the unborn.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Great.
What state house committee would you like to serve on, and what do you think are the most important issues for those committees for 2015?
Okay. I know as a freshman it's a real challenge to get on some of the good committees, if you will, the ones that really make some decisions, make a difference. One that I would love to serve on would be the Ethics Committee. I feel like I've led a life of integrity, of transparency, of honesty, and so I'd love to be a part of making sure that our state legislators are held accountable for what they do, and that they have very specific, clear, simple rules as to how they are to do their business and how they are to represent the people of Georgia, and particularly the people in their district. The Education Committee would be one that I would be very interested in, having taught school myself for 7 years in the Cobb County system, and having a son who's at Kennesaw State right now preparing to be a teacher, and having a mother who served on the State Board of Education back in the 80s, education is very important to me. And so I would love to have a voice in some educational reform that would improve our students' performance here in the state of Georgia. Health and Human Services would be one that would be attractive to me because of my pro-life stance. Of course, appropriations would be great because I think we have a real spending problem. But from what I understand, it'd be very difficult for a freshman to get on that committee. Ways and Means obviously would be another one where major decisions are being made. I guess as a freshman, my position would be that those committees that I could not get on because basically freshmen are shut out from those positions, it would be my strategy to make friends with those that are on the committee and to try to establish some influence about what legislation comes out of those committees. Because I think we do have a spending problem. So the Appropriations Committee is probably the most important committee that we have.
Wes, you touched on it in that last question, but what other characteristics and qualities do you believe are important for the state House representative to possess?
Okay, well, I think servant leadership is key, and I think recognizing that it's the people's seat. I mean, this seat belongs to the people, and we're there to represent primarily the House District 22, but also the entire state of Georgia. What's good for District 22 is good for the state of Georgia. So I think servant leadership. I think the role of a state legislator matches up well with the other roles that I've had in my life: school teacher, youth pastor. I've started three nonprofit organizations. I've led several nonprofits. I've sat on the board of 5 nonprofit organizations. So organizations that serve the community. My wife and I were part of 3 families who started the King's Academy, the first hybrid school in the state of Georgia. It's been in Woodstock for the last 15 years, has over 800 students. So serving the people, being open to listen, being able to sit down with people you may disagree with and have a rational conversation and find out, focus on the things that we can agree on and not the things that we disagree on. I would love to sit down with someone who people would perceive as being completely opposite from me politically and have a conversation and find some areas where we might agree. Things like things we could do for single moms, things we could do in the area of foster care, how we could promote adoption. I mean, I see all of these issues as nonpartisan issues where we could definitely reach across the aisle and find some agreement.
Based on your understanding of the Georgia Constitution, what do you believe the role of the state representative should be?
I feel like I just answered that question. Did I answer that question?
We ask the same questions from...
Oh, okay. All right. That's fair enough. The role of the state legislator is to develop and enact legislation that benefits the people of Georgia for the betterment of the state as a whole, and particularly to represent the constituents in the district that you represent, District 22 in this case. I think that's best done by someone who understands what it means to be a servant leader, who understands that the seat belongs to the people, who understands that it's not about making a point, it's about making a difference, and who understands how to get along with others enough where you can build consensus without compromising your convictions.
Bill?
Wes, what is your position on the bill to make certain offices, the sheriff, district attorney, county commissioners, court clerk, to make those offices nonpartisan?
Okay, that's an interesting question. I think that I'm in favor of keeping them partisan, but I think the better question, if I will, if you'll allow me, would be more about voter registration, because we have open voter registration here. So if we had closed voter registration, where voters had to declare their party affiliation when they registered to vote, then we would not have a lot of the shenanigans that we have in our county, particularly in Cherokee County, where we have hardcore libertarians running as Republicans because they know they can't win if they run as a libertarian. And we occasionally have Democrats who run as Republicans because they know they can't win as a Democrat. And then you have the issue of when we go to the ballot box, if a candidate is a Democrat masquerading as a Republican, then Democrats are allowed to come out and vote on that person's behalf. So I would be in favor of closed voter registration. We had to declare your party affiliation when you registered. Florida has closed registration. I believe North Carolina has closed registration. So it's not a crazy idea. I think many of the states out west, I think, have closed registration. So I understand the question. I don't think that school board, sheriff, these things should be nonpartisan, because I think that would even muddy the water even further and allow people to kind of masquerade. If there were a way that we could make sure that candidates had to accurately reveal who they were and where they stood on the issues prior to an election, then I would be in favor of it being nonpartisan. But I'm afraid that if it was nonpartisan, there would be a great encouragement to a candidate to really hide and masquerade as something that they were not in order to get elected, and then only to have the poor voters of our district find out that they were really different than they appeared during the campaign.
Thank you.
Wes, what is your position on term limits?
I'm for them. In fact, I think I'll be the only candidate in this race to tell you that I am term limiting myself right now to 4 terms. I'm not nuancing the answer. I'm not saying anything except clearly that. And when I get elected, one of the first things that I will either sponsor or support is legislation that will require all state legislator positions to be term limited. I'm open to a discussion, but I think 4 terms is probably the right number. 3 is too few. 6 is too many. 5 might be okay, but I think 4, as I look at, 8 years, that ought to be enough. And I'm going to serve my 8 terms. I'll be 60 years old, 8 terms. My 4 terms, my 8 years, I'll be 60 years old. I'll be ready to let someone else, some other citizen. We have great citizens in our districts who could do a great job serving us. And the advantages of incumbency are so huge that once someone gets into position, it's very difficult to get them out. And I know people will say, well, we have term limits. They're called elections every 2 years. And while I agree with that, the incumbent has so much of an advantage. Several in the Cherokee delegation have already done this, Michael Caldwell being one, Scott Turner being another. I'm not aware of Ms. Ballinger's position on term limits, but I think it's something whose time has come.
The next is a 3-parter. I'll take all the questions and then we will go back.
I may have to write it. I may have to write this down.
In your opinion, what's the purpose of the Second Amendment? Do you believe that federal gun control laws are constitutional? And does the state have the right to confiscate firearms in an emergency?
Okay. Emergency confiscation. Simply no, no, and no. You asked me what the purpose of the Second Amendment was.
In your opinion?
In my opinion, the Second Amendment says what it says. I don't think it's unclear. I don't think it needs to be parsed or nuanced. It's clear that the Founding Fathers gave us the right to bear arms. So it says what it says. That's what it means. Let's stop, arguing about what it means. It's clear. So the Second Amendment's clear. It means that we have the right to bear arms, and I believe in the Second Amendment. We have a process for the federal government if people believe that we ought to amend our Constitution and change that. But it is the Second Amendment, and I support it fully. Federal gun laws, are they constitutional? Is that what you asked me? As a state legislator, I can have an opinion about that, but I really can't do anything about that. So I do not believe that it's constitutional. But what I would say to you as a state legislator, I would do everything in my power if the federal government enacted any kind of gun control. I would do everything in my power to nullify that act under the 10th Amendment, similar to how I would be in favor of doing that in the case of Obamacare. Okay, I would do the same thing if they decided to try to overreach their constitutional bounds and enact federal gun control. I can't say it emphatic enough that I would be opposed to the confiscation of our arms in the case of emergency. Seems like that might be the time when we need it the most. So, yeah, I mean, that's not even a question for me. No way, no how.
Okay, thank you.
Bill, do the next one, please.
Sure. What is your opinion of constitutional carry, and how about the limitations on carry, such as campuses and churches?
Okay. I'm in favor of constitutional carry. As I said in the previous question, the Second Amendment says what it says. So I know we've chosen to call that constitutional carry. I mean, it's our right. The government has given us this right, whether it was theirs to give or not. They've given it to us. And so we have the right to bear arms. So I believe in constitutional carry. I know there are some situations under which there may be some responsible, as long as someone's a law-abiding citizen who's done what they're supposed to do, to have the right, to have the license, or whatever it is that they need to do, I am for constitutional carry. I think I nuanced that a little too much. I believe in the right to bear arms, and I believe you have that right if you're a law-abiding citizen in any venue. There may be some circumstances under which that could be, rightfully denied in highly unusual circumstances. I do not believe the church campus or the college campus would qualify, though.
Okay, thank you.
The next questions I'll gladly read portions of. The first is a statement I'll make, if you will.
Okay.
And then we'll follow along from that. The state collects monies for business licenses, renewals, environmental issues, and other transactions in what are categorized as funds. The monies collected are lumped into the general fund. Question, should the fees collected in the above individual funds be actually used as the legislation intended, or just placed into the general fund for appropriation as the legislature sees fit?
Okay, great question. Any licensing funds collected should be used for the purpose for which they were collected. So whatever that might be, it should be earmarked for that. It should not go into a general fund for the legislators to use as a slush fund or whatever, for whatever causes are important to them. It should be used for the purpose for which it was intended.
Okay, addendum to that, would you support a constitutional amendment to require monies collected actually be used for the intended legislation?
I probably would. It seems unnecessary. We ought to, if monies are collected for a certain reason, they ought to be used for that reason. We shouldn't have to put an amendment in place to force the legislature to use the monies in the way that they were intended to be used. However, if that's what it takes to make state legislators abide by the rules, then I would be in favor of putting that up to the vote and let the people of Georgia vote for it.
Bill?
Wes, what does the 10th Amendment mean to you?
You talking about state rights? Which part of the 10th Amendment?
The 10th Amendment,
Okay.
the entire amendment.
Well, states' rights, I believe that it basically limits the federal government to perform the duties as prescribed in the Constitution and to leave all the other duties that are not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution to the states. So the states the federal government needs to stay out of the business of the states. If it's not explicitly spelled out in the Constitution that is the duty of the federal government, then it's not their duty, and they need to stay out of it and let the states make those decisions.
Okay, do you believe that states have the right to nullify unconstitutional federal laws?
Yes, absolutely, and I would be in favor of whatever means. I mean, as an example, Obamacare. I personally, my health insurance premium, the portion that I pay, went up 70% this year, and a lot of that had to do with Obamacare. And most constituents that I've talked to about this issue have had similar experiences. School employees, some of the part-time employees who work part-time jobs primarily because of the insurance benefit, they had to absorb that increase out of the meager salary they were getting as a part-time employee at the same rate as the full-time employees had to. So what's going to happen is we're going to lose a lot of those part-time employees once they start doing the math on, is it really worth it to drive a school bus? Is it really worth it to do these part-time jobs that I was doing simply for the health insurance benefit, but now that benefit's eating up every dollar I'm getting paid. So yes, I'm in favor of nullification.
Thank you.
Are there any conditions under which
We do not have a tax problem, we have a spending problem. So I'm in favor of cutting spending. There's no scenario I can imagine under which I would be in favor of raising taxes. It's not necessary. We need to streamline government and cut out the redundancy and cut spending.
Okay. Wes, would you support a policy change that would require a 24-hour notice prior to final vote and reading of any bill that goes through the legislature?
Okay, so you're asking me for a 24-hour waiting period before you vote,
The final vote.
the final vote. No, I don't think I'd be in favor of that.
Okay.
They should, if you're doing your job as a state legislator, you should understand the bill you're voting for. You have ample time to study it and to make up your mind and decide how you're going to vote. I don't think you need another 24-hour window where lobbyists and others, to make it even more likely that outside influences could influence your vote.
Okay, thank you.
Do you know what the current method is?
The current method of,
Passing legislation? As described in the previous question.
I'm not sure I know what you're asking me.
Do you know how the legislature passes current legislation?
By voting? I'm sorry.
Procedural.
I don't know that I understand all the ins and outs of it, but I know that by the time it comes time for me to vote, I'm gonna understand the legislation that I'm voting for and know where I stand on it and vote my convictions without outside influence.
Okay. What is the state of Georgia's role in immigration, securing the border, and amnesty?
As I understand that, the Constitution, that's a federal responsibility. So Georgia really doesn't have a lot to do with immigration law. We can't grant citizenship. We can't grant amnesty. So what we have is that Georgia is experiencing the consequences of the federal government not doing their job when it comes to immigration. So there are some things we can do that are kind of secondary. We can make sure that in order to get a driver's license in the state of Georgia, you have to be a legal resident. We can make sure that only legal residents receive state tuition, in-state tuition. We can make sure that any services that the state of Georgia provides, you have to be a legal resident in order to receive those services. So there are some ancillary things that we can do as a state, but primarily that's a federal issue. As a state legislator, we may have some influence over that, and we can certainly make it as difficult as possible. There's a lot of people. I met someone at a meeting Tuesday night. It took him 14 years to get his citizenship here in our states, he stood in line. He did it legally. He did all the things you have to do, and he doesn't understand why other people are getting a pass on that. So the federal government has to be held accountable to enforce the laws that are on the books already about immigration.
Wes, do you support House Bill 309, ABA's law, as it relates to the state requiring insurance coverage for autism? And to follow up, do you support the medical marijuana bill that came up this previous session?
Okay, I'm not real up on ABA's law, so it requires state health insurance has to cover autism, even if it's a pre-existing condition.
That's right, as it relates to the state requiring insurance coverage.
I hate to not be able to answer a question because that doesn't look good, I know, but I need to study that further. The idea of requiring insurance to cover a particular condition is somewhat foreign to me, but in the case of autism, I'm prone to believe I'd be in favor of that being a part of what insurance needs to cover. The second question, the medical marijuana, better known as the cannabis oil, right? That's what you're talking about? I think it's important how we phrase what that bill was about, because there's a lot of confusion about it. If I understand it correctly, the cannabis oil would benefit a small number of families whose children have a very rare condition that results in horrible seizures and pain, And I would be in favor of the cannabis oil bill as it was written. However, I do want to make clear I'm not in favor of marijuana being legalized. And I know a lot of people see this issue as a slippery slope issue, but I see it as an issue of an opportunity to help some families who are not receiving help otherwise that could really provide some relief for their children. And I will say that the way that those, if I understood it correctly, those two bills kind of got intertwined a little bit and played politics with, and that was an example of politics at its worst, where certain legislators chose to play politics with something that could have really helped Georgians, and instead, I won't pass your bill if you won't pass my bill kind of thing started happening, and back and forth between the House and the Senate. And so hundreds of families who could have been helped by this cannabis oil bill weren't helped. And to me, that's an embarrassment. And that's why people don't like politicians. And that's why, that's one of the reasons why I'm running, is to breathe the fresh air into the political world and be the kind of, I hate to use the word, be the kind of politician that I want. As an ordinary citizen, I want the politicians to be. Do what's right. Don't play politics with stuff.
Thank you.
What is the unemployment rate in your district?
It's hard to say exactly for my district. Cherokee County is right around 6%. We have a portion of Fulton County, which is Milton. It's a little bit lower there. I think it's like 5.5%. The Forsyth portion of the district is about 5.5% as well. So specifically to my district, I do not know, but I know for Cherokee County it's about 6%. It's about probably at least 2% higher than it should be. I think a full employment is represented by about a 4% rate, and that's where we need to be. We need to be down around 4%.
Wes, you touched on it, but again, what is your position on the Affordable Care Act?
Oh, yeah, opposed. I can't think of one good thing about it. That would be first and foremost. I know we kind of made some progress this legislative session, but we didn't go near far enough. Again, some politics was played, but we need to do whatever we can, be it nullification. I know we can't repeal it, I don't think but we can defund it. There's all kinds of things we can do to protect Georgians from it. And so I'm in favor of exhausting every alternative we have as a state to protect the citizens of Georgia from the effects of Obamacare.
Okay.
When is the government allowed to take actions inconsistent with the Constitution?
Never.
Wes, currently the school system's funding is basically capped at 20 mils. The start would be a vote by the delegation in order to increase that under the state constitution. Do you see any way that you would support an increase in that 20 million?
The funding mechanisms for education are not the problem. The problem is our economy. Education funding has gone down because our economy is not robust. It's not what it needs to be. We need jobs. We need to improve the economy. The formulas are set up how the funds go to education, and those formulas are solid. 56 cents on every dollar of the state budget goes to education. In this year's budget that was raised, every new dollar, 81 cents of every new dollar went to education. We don't have a funding problem. We have an economy problem. So we need to get the economy rolling, get more people employed, and those numbers will go up automatically because of the way that the monies are allocated. There are some ways we could cut some spending in administrative areas. Cherokee County teachers do a fantastic job. We have one of the best school systems in the state. Our teachers are in the top 5 salary-wise, statewide. There's always room for improvement, though. And I think we need someone to take a hard look at how and make sure that we're being very efficient in the way we spend our education dollars, make sure that people are held accountable for how we're spending our education dollars, and make sure those stay focused and that we give parents options, that that if their child's not performing well in a traditional setting, that they have other options for educating their child.
So would you support a millage rate increase at the cap over 20 mils?
No, I wouldn't.
Okay.
I'm gonna put both these together, Bill.
Sure.
Do you accept donations from outside your district? If yes, how do outside district donations affect your decision-making? And along the same line, are you receiving PAC or lobbyist contributions?
Okay, I have received money from people outside my district. Receiving money from anyone, be it an individual, company, PAC, whatever, is not going to affect where I stand and my convictions and my stance on the issues. I have not received any PAC money to this point, but I'm not opposed to receiving PAC money. I have been a lifelong networker. When I was a youth pastor, I built networks of youth ministries all over the state of Georgia. When I taught school in Cobb County, I taught in all 27 middle schools because I was kind of a designated hitter going from school to school. I have friends all over this state, so I have received monies from individuals who are friends of mine, who know me, who know where I stand on the issues, many of whom don't live in my district, many of whom do. It doesn't matter. Whoever gives me money, it's not going to affect my stance on the issues. I am going to assume, rightfully or wrongfully, that anybody who gives me money does so because they already believe where I stand on the issues and understand that that money is not going to affect a vote on legislation or affect my stand in any way. That the reason they're giving me the money is because they support who I am and what I stand for already.
Wes, can you describe the geographic boundaries of the district and how much of your district includes Cherokee County?
Okay, that's a good question. It is kind of an unusual district, and we're the only district, 22 is the only district that's not entirely contained within Cherokee County. So I think it's about 85% of the district is in Cherokee County. We have a small portion of Fulton County that encompasses the city of Milton, and then that's probably 5%, and then about 10% is made up of the Forsyth portion of the district, which is in southwest corner of Forsyth, Polo Grounds, Brandywine. There's 3 precincts. I can't think of the third one's name, but it's kind of unusual, and I think it makes a real challenge for whoever's going to represent 22 to be able to represent someone who lives in Milton and someone who lives in Ball Ground, someone who lives in Nelson, someone who lives in Macedonia, Freehome, Woodstock. I live in Woodstock, and there's just barely a little bit of Woodstock that's in the district. Hickory Flat is really kind of the community that I live in, so it's a challenge. I think I answered all your questions.
Thank you.
For solutions to the traffic and other infrastructure issues, do you support the regional approach such as the Atlanta Regional Commission or another method of dealing with these issues?
Okay, I do not support the regional approach, and even the name regional is kind of misleading because it makes it sound like it's local, but the region is a lot bigger than they cover than what I would think of. I would think a region might be just my county, but no, it means like all of Metro Atlanta. So I oppose that. I don't want people making decisions about transportation in my portions of Cherokee, Forsyth, and Fulton counties that don't live anywhere near this area, or a bureaucrat somewhere sitting up in an office making a decision, not understanding the ramifications and the consequences of those choices. I prefer for those decisions to be made locally. A great issue here locally is the expansion of Highway 20. There are those who want us to take federal funding to expand Highway 20, but if we take federal funding, we'd have to accept the federal guidelines, which would greatly increase the amount of how wide the highway would be, how much it would, and I can't think of the word, but it would creep in on people's property, and we'd have to, eminent domain might be used in those cases, when we could just use a common sense approach, keep Highway 20 where Highway 20 is, and widen it where necessary with the least amount of impact on the economically as well as environmentally. So in order to do that, we've got to keep those decisions at the local level.
Wes, what should the state's role be in regards to alternative energy sources or subsidies?
Okay. Well, I believe it was the Territorial Act that was enacted that basically gave Georgia Power an energy monopoly here in the state of Georgia. The answer to your question is private enterprise. However, we've got to encourage private enterprise to invest in alternative energy sources but with the current monopoly, it's very difficult for private enterprise to get involved because of the risk. So I think the first thing would be to deregulate to allow more energy companies to have a shot at the business. And then that would encourage entrepreneurs to develop alternative sources of energy. People are very open to using alternative source energy, cars, different solar panels, all of that, but you've got to make it affordable. It's got to be, it's got to work. I'm not going to drive an electric car just so I can be proudly say I drive an electric car, and there I'm stuck out on the road every other day. So all of these things need to be explored, but I think that the question is really more about the deregulation and allowing more energy companies to have a shot at that business so that private enterprise could then. I think we need to encourage alternative energy businesses in the same way that we ought to encourage any kind of business in our state. We ought to make our state the place that businesses want to come and build their factories and locate their employees. This ought to be the best place on the planet. I love it. I live here. I think it's a great place to live. I think if other people were encouraged and we incentivized businesses moving to Georgia, they'd find Georgia to be the great place that you and I both know it is already.
Okay, thank you.
There are a number of issues the agriculture industry is facing in Georgia, including water use, state and federal regulation compliance, tax reform, and immigration reform. Do you have a plan to address these issues for the agricultural community in Cherokee County?
I don't have a specific plan for the issues that you mentioned, but I do believe those are localized plans, and that the local legislators have got to work together to address those issues one by one. The water issue. What were the two other ones?
Tax reform, immigration, state and federal.
Well, tax reform, obviously I'm opposed to the state income tax, and I'm for meaningful property tax reform as well. So we need to lower taxes. I'm for that. But you've got to build a coalition to make that happen. So we need a state legislator who works well with others and can help establish legislation that's passable to get us moving in the right direction. Each of those issues need to be addressed locally.
Wes, what's your opinion on the Common Core State Standards Initiative?
Okay. As a rule, on principle, I am opposed to Common Core, and let me explain to you why. Common Core, in many ways, assumes that students learn the same way and at the same pace. If you have more than one child, you know that this is not true. I have 3 children. They all learned very differently. Common Core, in many ways, tries to sort of cookie cut kids and make them all be the same, and they're just not. Now, I understand the benefits of Common Core. If someone were to move into our state from another state and we were all on the same place, it would make it easier for someone moving into our state from somewhere else. However, I'm not in favor of enacting Common Core in order to benefit the few at the expense of the many. We've got to recognize that local control doesn't just mean the school district. It means parents. Parents having the authority to make the decisions that are best for their child's education. A lot of children learn better in non-traditional settings, and parents need to know that that's okay. And not only is it okay, but they're encouraged to pursue other alternatives if their kids aren't performing up to speed in the current environment. Class size, student to teacher ratio, these visual learners versus book learners, virtual, online resources, all of these resources need to be available to our parents. While the Bible says it best. The Bible says, train up a child in the way he should go. It's a great proverb. And basically what it's saying is that every child's different. They have a different bent. They have a different brain. And we've got to be flexible in our approach to allow children to succeed. Every child can succeed, but they've got to be put in the right environment in order to do so. I think Common Core was well-intentioned, and I see some upside to it. But the downside is so great that, I guess what I would say is if Cherokee County said, we want Common Core in our public schools, then I would say, okay, we should have Common Core because that's what our district was given a chance to speak into it, and that's what we want. What I'm also saying, though, is if the bureaucrats down at the Capitol or the bureaucrats in Washington are telling us your students have to have Common Core, that's not the right approach. It's got to be a local decision.
Okay, thank you.
What are your most important interests outside of your current work?
Wow, that's an open-ended question. I like to read. I sit on the boards of several nonprofits. I just rotated off the board of Life Resources of Georgia, which is a pro-life organization which provides training and funding for pregnancy centers all over our state. I serve on the board of an organization called Patch Our Planet. It's an organization dedicated to adoption, to building partnerships between churches and overseas orphanages to make it easier and quicker and simpler and more affordable to help children, orphans, find a loving family to grow up in here in the States or overseas for that matter. I'm on the board of a ministry called First Priority, which is a ministry that builds networks of youth pastors in a community, and then those networks of youth pastors serve the schools in their community by volunteering, by substitute teaching. I mean, when I was doing this, I was a library monitor. I swept the gym floor. I basically just made myself available to the principals because I want principals of schools to understand that the church can be a great resource to them of manpower and people that are willing to serve without proselytizing. They want to serve their community as well. Let's see, what other things do I like to do in my free time? My children are all grown now. My youngest daughter graduated from high school last year. So my children were my hobby for about 24 years and still are. We spend a lot of time with them. They all live locally. I'm kind of a boring person, to be honest with you. I don't have a lot of hobbies outside of my family, my ministry. As a pastor, it's a full-time job, and it's 24/7. I get calls, and I love what I do. I'm not complaining. I get called at night, Saturday mornings, Sunday afternoon, you name it. But these are people that I love and I serve, and I love serving them. So that takes up most of my time.
Wes, would you work with those across the aisle to pass a budget?
Every chance I could, if it made sense. If there was a budget item that required, that I believed in, that I could support, and it required working across the aisle to do so, I would work across the aisle regardless, because when I get down there, I'm not going to look at people as with a D or the R beside their name. I'm just going to look at them as people, engage them, build relationships. I love to sit down with someone with whom I disagree and have a rational conversation and try to understand, not what is it we disagree about. We know that, but why? Why do we disagree? Maybe there's a deeper rooted issue but beneath that we can agree on. Take pro-life, for example. I think being pro-life means a lot more than just being against abortion. It means economic development for single moms. It means child care options so they can work. It means training so that if a young lady finds herself pregnant, she realizes she's got support, she's got a community, she's got help to make the right choice and to allow that unborn child to continue living, whether it means adoption or whether it means that she goes to school and gets a job and is able to care for that child herself. So I think those issues are bipartisan. I can't imagine talking with someone and someone disagreeing with speaking up for those who can't speak for themselves.
Do you support the fair tax or flat tax, or some other alternative plan?
After looking at all of them, I support the fair tax. I think it's the best, simplest solution. And right now is a great time to have this conversation because a lot of people are sitting at home today or tonight. Either they're paying several $100s, some people I guess pay thousands of dollars to have their taxes prepared for them, or they're struggling through some online program like I do. I do my own taxes, trying to figure out is this deduction legal, is it not? It's so complicated. If we could get to the fair tax, we could abolish the IRS, and especially with the recent abuses of the IRS, I think we've got some momentum and some, people are more aware of what's going on there. We get rid of the IRS, we can stop sending people to jail for accidentally evading their taxes, whether they did it on purpose or not, I can't say, but a lot of people have accidentally not paid a tax because it's so complicated. It's insane to me that we can't figure out a simple way for people to pay their taxes. And instead, we've created bureaucracy layer upon layer upon layer that makes April 15th the worst day of the year for, thousands and millions of people across our country and even in our state of Georgia. So I'm for the consumption tax, the fair tax, and that way it allows the consumers basically to decide how much tax they want to pay by how much they consume. I think it's probably the fairest and simplest way to get it done.
What is your name and legal residence? How long have you resided in Cherokee County for HD22?
You want my full legal name?
Please.
All right, Wesley Eugene Cantrell, Jr.
Okay.
I reside at 1044 Meadowbrook Drive in Woodstock. I have lived in Cherokee County for 12 years. I've lived in Woodstock for 22 years.
We're on the final stage.
Great.
Have you ever had any license revoked or not renewed for cause, or been the subject of professional discipline, or cited for breach of ethics or unprofessional conduct by any bar association, disciplinary committee, court, administrative agency, or other professional group? Or have you been expelled from any organization?
No. Have you?
Have you or any organization or business under your control ever declared a bankruptcy or been sued or currently facing liens or other financial issues?
No.
Have you ever been arrested for or convicted of any crime excluding minor traffic offenses?
No, sir.
Please describe one instance in which you faced an ethical dilemma and how you resolved it.
Oh, wow. When my wife and I got married, we lived in Mississippi at the time, and we took a job in Woodstock. Well, the job was in Marietta, but we lived in Woodstock. So we moved to Woodstock. Before we moved, we sold our house in Mississippi. And this was before email and all of that, so you had to do business by fax. So we were doing the closing by a fax machine, long distance. So the contract for the house that we had sold in Mississippi came through the fax machine, and for some reason, the contract said that we had sold the house to this gentleman for about $5,000 more than we had actually agreed to. So after I got over the fact that I was happily surprised that I had actually received a lot more money for my house than we had agreed to, I realized, wait, something's wrong here. So I called him on the phone, and I said, you and I agreed to this price, but yet the contract says $5,000 more. What's going on here? And he said, what I need an 80% loan in order to qualify. And so I need that 80% to actually be 100% of what we agreed to at the price of your house. So my idea was we say it's that price, which is 20% more than we actually agreed to, and then you write me a rebate check for the difference, so I qualify at the bank for 100% of the loan. And I said, well, whatever gave you the idea that I would agree to that? And he said, well, what does it matter to you? And I said, well, it's fraud. You're asking me to sign a document which would represent fraud. Plus, what would keep me from just keeping all the money? What guarantee do you have that I would, because the contract says this price. I said, no, the contract needs to be for what we agreed to. Well, he was very unhappy with that answer. His wife called me also. She was very unhappy as well. And that decision, now granted, we're already moved to Woodstock. This house is in Mississippi. I was very concerned about suddenly I was going to own two places of residence if this deal didn't go through, although we were renting at the time. We had not bought a house yet over here. So I had to negotiate again on a deal that we had already agreed to, and that cost me about $1,000. My honesty that day and my integrity cost me about $1,000 that day. But I realized, at what price you know, what's the price of your integrity? And there shouldn't be a price for your integrity. You should always be honest and do the right thing, no matter if it benefits you or it hurts you. And so that's probably the first example. I could cite several, but that's the first one that comes to mind.
Thank you. Are you currently connected to any outstanding unpaid taxes in any way?
No, sir.
Is there anything else we should know that has not been addressed? This basically is a time for you to go ahead and address the potential voters.
Okay.
At your will, and present anything that you care to.
Okay. Well, I'm 52 years old. I've never held political office before. My children, I have 3 children. Been married for 28 years to Jane, and I've been very involved in our community over my whole life. I've been a servant leader in church work primarily, taught school for 7 years in Cobb County, served on several boards. So my life has been a life of service, although it's not technically been public service. With my children being grown now, I have a little more bandwidth in my life, and my wife and I were very concerned about our district, about some of the things that have been going on recently. And we were complaining about it and decided, you know what, it's time to stop complaining and time to get involved. So that's why I decided to run for State Representative, House District 22. I'm very concerned that our district be represented by someone who can lead. I have a lot of experience leading large organizations. My department at the church has over 1,500 people in it. My wife and I helped start a school that has over 800 students. So I have a lot of experience working with large organizations, people that don't necessarily agree about everything, but are coming together around a common goal. I want to make sure that our district has a voice down at the Capitol. I want to make sure that the Cherokee delegation is well represented and that we can all work together to benefit specifically the things in Cherokee, since I'm at the Cherokee Republican Party meeting right now. I also look forward to working with the Forsyth delegations and the Fulton delegations as well. So I believe that I bring a level of life experience to the table that neither one of my opponents can claim, and experience leading large organizations and working with others for the common good. So that's why I think I would make a great state representative for House District 22.
Thank you for participating in our forum, and we look forward to presenting this to the voters.
And Bill and Harry, thank you for the honor of being here and for the opportunity. Appreciate it.